While you believe nothing is taking place, something has already begun stirring within his mind. This may seem like nothing at all, yet it represents precisely what causes someone to think about you without being able to stop it. In this material, you will come to understand how the male subconscious operates during nighttime hours, why certain emotional bonds refuse to break, and how to activate a quiet psychological trigger that makes someone feel your presence even when you are far away. Have you ever noticed how certain presences refuse to leave our minds? Even when that person is no longer there, sometimes there exists no message, no explanation, no clear goodbye, only that strange silence, heavy, that seems to scream inside the chest. And it is precisely within that silence that something powerful takes place. Nighttime is not simply the moment when the body rests. Nighttime is the territory where emotions that were suppressed throughout the day finally breathe. It is when defenses drop, when rational control weakens, when the subconscious begins to speak louder than logic. And that is when memories, bonds, and desires return to the surface without asking permission. If you feel this silence, write night in the comments. Perhaps you have already experienced this, that sudden sensation before sleeping, when the mind slows down and without warning his face appears, a detail of the voice, a gesture that remained stored, a memory that seemed dormant but never died. You do not call for this, it simply happens. The heart reacts before thought, the body recognizes before reason. And the most curious thing is that this movement does not happen only in you. When a genuine emotional tie exists, even if confused, even if interrupted, it does not disappear in the silence. It transforms. It migrates to the subconscious, where it continues active, pulsing, influencing thoughts, dreams, and impulses without the person noticing. Many men do not know how to deal with their own emotional world. They push feelings down, pretend they forgot, follow the routine as if nothing had happened. But at night, the mind does not accept lies. The subconscious does not obey masks. It is in this moment that what was denied during the day begins to emerge. A restlessness without name, a longing that cannot explain itself, a silent impulse to search, to remember, to draw near, even without understanding why. Perhaps you have already lived that strange experience of feeling someone thinking about you without any logical explanation, or receiving an unexpected message after days, weeks, months of silence, as if something had been activated on an invisible plane before manifesting in the real world. This is not emotional coincidence. This is psychic connection. It is the meeting of two stories that have not yet been emotionally closed. And when you understand this functioning, something shifts inside you. You stop feeling powerless, forgotten, invisible. You realize that your presence is not limited to what is said, to what is shown, to what is demanded. There exists a much deeper presence, the one that inhabits the emotional memory, the imagination, the dreams, and the voids that the other tries to ignore. Nighttime amplifies this. It opens internal portals, it dissolves defenses, it reveals truths that the day hides. And when you learn to position yourself in this invisible territory, you do not force anything. You do not beg for attention. You do not chase. You simply awaken something that was already there, only sleeping. Imagine two houses built on opposite sides of a mountain. During the day, everything seems separate. Each follows its own routine. Their lights turn on and off at different hours. The sounds do not mix. The paths do not cross. At first glance, they seem isolated worlds. But beneath the mountain, there exists the same underground water sheet that feeds both. Even without seeing each other, they drink from the same source. This is how the invisible bonds work between two people who touched each other emotionally, in truth. What seems separate on the surface continues connected in depth. When nighttime arrives, the external world silences, and what was hidden begins to echo inside. The defenses fall asleep, the masks fall, and the internal corridors of the mind illuminate like an ancient labyrinth. It is in this moment that the subconscious minds begin to recognize each other, as if they lit lanterns for one another in the dark. An image surfaces without effort, a name crosses the thought, a feeling returns without warning. It is not conscious choice, it is symbolic communication. It is the underground moving. Think now of two stars that seem distant in the sky. To the naked eye, there exists no thread connecting one to the other, but in the vastness of the universe, they share invisible gravitational fields that influence each other mutually. A small oscillation in one star subtly alters the field of the other, even at thousands of light-years of distance. So too are the deep emotional connections. When one heart moves internally, something vibrates in the other. Even though no external gesture has happened, the human mind is a living symbolic field. Everything that was lived with intensity leaves invisible marks that continue emitting signals, like a song that remains vibrating even after the instrument was silenced. At night, this song becomes more audible, the noise of the world diminishes, and the internal melody rises in volume. This is why memories surface with more force at this hour, why dreams become more vivid, why unresolved desires return to knock at the door of consciousness. When two emotional histories intertwine, a common territory is created, an invisible space, where memories, images, and sensations continue circulating. Even if the external contact has ceased, this territory remains active, waiting to be touched again. It is not magic in the fantastical sense. It is symbolic language of the psyche. It is the way the subconscious converses when words no longer reach. Sometimes, a simple thought charged with emotion is sufficient to generate an echo on the other side of this invisible bridge, like a stone thrown in a dark lake that creates silent waves that cross the water until touching the other shore. You perhaps have already felt this without noticing. That sudden sensation of presence, that soft tightness in the chest without apparent reason, that strange impulse to look at the phone without knowing why. These signals are not born from chance. They are born from this shared field between two minds that still recognize each other in the invisible. When you understand that this territory exists, you begin to see your emotions not as fragility, but as language. A silent language that crosses time, distance, and pride. And it is exactly in this symbolic space that the deepest transformations begin to happen. There exists a moment when the man stops moving by logic and begins to be conducted by something he himself does not understand. He may even try to rationalize, occupy the mind with work, distractions, commitments, but there exists an internal image that insists on remaining alive. In depth psychology, this image is not just a memory, it is an emotional archetype. It is the internal representation of the feminine that inhabits the masculine subconscious and that begins to be activated when a woman touches deep layers of his identity. When this happens, something changes silently. He does not perceive it immediately, but begins to feel a subtle restlessness, a sensation of absence that cannot explain itself, a strange void that is not filled with anything external. It is as if a part of him were being called back to an emotional place that only one specific person managed to access. This is not born from the body, it is born from the psyche. It is born from the emotional bond that was registered in the deep memory. Perhaps you have already felt this from the other side, that sensation that there exists something different in the way you marked someone. It was not just conversation, it was not just attraction, it was not just a moment. There was real emotional presence, there was exchange of psychic energy, even without words. And when this feminine image becomes fixed inside his mind, it begins to act like an invisible magnet. Another very common sign is the energetic shift in your own internal posture. You begin to feel less needy, less anxious, less trapped in expectation. There exists a silent confidence that is born without effort, a sensation of alignment as if something were flowing at the right time, even without control. This is one of the greatest indicators that the process is working, when you stop needing the result desperately, because anxiety closes the field, presence opens it. Many women also notice that he begins to appear in seemingly random ways. Indirect comments, questions about the past, subtle curiosity about your current life, small attempts at reapproach that do not totally assume the intention, but leave clear emotional traces. The man, when he is moved by the subconscious, rarely approaches directly in the first moment. He tests the emotional territory before exposing himself. He observes, he feels, he tries to understand what is happening inside him, and this generates silent behaviors, but consistent ones. Perhaps you have already lived this before and just did not know how to name it. Perhaps you are living it now and still do not have certainty, but if you begin to perceive soft patterns of reconnection, repeated synchronicities, subtle movements that seem to align, trust your perception. Feminine intuition recognizes changes in the emotional field before the rational mind accepts. Do not minimize what you feel. Do not invalidate the small signs. They are like footprints in the sand before someone appears on the horizon line. Small, but real. If you trust your intuition, write signs in the comments. And the more you remain centered, open, and confident, the more natural this movement tends to strengthen. There exists something that silently can dismantle everything that began to align internally. Anxiety disguised as hope. It seems harmless at the beginning, comes as expectation, as curiosity, as desire to see the results soon, but inside, it carries a tension that the subconscious perceives immediately. When the mind begins to pressure time, to demand signs, to interpret each detail as proof or failure, the emotional field closes. It is like trying to hold water with your hands too tight. The more force you make, the more it escapes. Many women, without noticing, enter this cycle. Observe the phone with excessive frequency. Analyze each view, each silence, each minimal movement as if it were an emotional thermometer. The heart begins to oscillate between hope and frustration, and this oscillation generates internal noise. The subconscious does not respond well to noise. It responds to coherence, to stability, to tranquil presence. Another common error is trying to control the process externally, sending messages outside of emotional alignment, seeking direct validation, creating artificial situations to provoke response. This breaks the subtlety of the internal movement. When action is born from anxiety, it transmits insecurity. Even if the words seem neutral, the other feels it, even without knowing how to explain. The emotional energy communicates before logic. There also exists the attachment to the idealized image of the result. When you rigidly fix a specific form of how everything should happen, you close natural possibilities of reconnection that could arise in more authentic ways. The subconscious works with fluidity, not with rigidity. The more you release control, the more space you create for the movement to happen without resistance. And perhaps the most delicate point is this: using this practice as emotional escape, trying to fill an internal void that does not belong to the other. No external connection can compensate for a disconnection with yourself. When you try to use the other as anesthesia for your own pain, the field becomes unbalanced, the intention stops being clean, the energy fragments, the process loses strength. The true alignment is born when you are not trying to complete yourself through someone, but to share something that is already whole inside you. This does not mean stopping desiring. It means desiring without losing yourself, feeling without imprisoning yourself, trusting without annulling yourself. When you maintain this internal posture, something very powerful happens. You stop emitting neediness and begin to emit presence. And presence is one of the most magnetic forces that exist in the human emotional field. The organized internal silence communicates more than any insistence. The emotional balance sustains the invisible movement, and the more you honor this state, the more natural the unfolding of what was initiated becomes. Nighttime does not ask for hurry, it asks for presence. When the world decelerates, when the external noises diminish, when the body finally releases the tensions of the day, something inside you also begins to reorganize. It is in this silent space that your emotional state becomes more honest, more sensitive, more connected with what really matters. The nighttime ritual is not a set of rigid steps. It is an encounter with yourself. It is the moment when you sit internally before your own feeling, without masks, without defenses, without judgments. Before thinking about any image, any intention, allow yourself to simply breathe and perceive how your body is, how your heart is, how your mind is. The more you listen to yourself, the more coherent your energy becomes. And coherence is the basis of any deep communication, including that which happens in the invisible. Instead of trying to force thoughts, allow his image to arise naturally like a soft memory, not as an obsession. Do not summon anxiety, invite calm. Feel the sensation that this memory awakens, not the desire to possess, but the quality of the connection, the tranquility, the complicity, the affection, the sensation of recognition. The subconscious responds much more to emotion than to the image itself. It is emotion that creates the field. It is emotion that generates the bond. You do not need to mentalize phrases, nor repeat commands, nor create mental effort. It is enough to sustain for some instance a clean emotional state, truthful, without charging, as if you were sending a silent vibration to the internal universe, and not a demand. Then, release, trust. Do not take this process to the anxiety of the next day. Do not keep waiting for signs like someone who watches a closed door. The ritual ends when you return the mind to rest. This gesture of releasing is as important as that of feeling, because it communicates to the subconscious that there exists security, not neediness, that there exists confidence, not fear, that there exists alignment, not dependence. With time, this practice also transforms you. You become more centered, more aware of your own emotional value, more connected with your intuition. You begin to perceive that your strength is not in convincing anyone, but in sustaining who you are. The true activation does not happen outside first, it happens inside. When your internal field organizes, the external responds naturally, without effort, without manipulation, without emotional wear. The ritual is not a request, it is an attunement. It is a fine adjustment between what you feel, what you emanate, and what you allow yourself to receive. Before sleeping, feel as if he were already at peace thinking about you, and then release this sensation completely. When you stop imploring with the mind and begin to trust with the heart, the connection finds its own path. To seal your intention, write "trust" in the comments.